I am here with Dr. Darrell Hall, and this is a little weird just because we're friends. And so when you're interviewing, well, I would say we're friends. Maybe you won't say that during this time, but when you're interviewing friends, there we go. When you're interviewing friends, sometimes you get a little casual. So I'm gonna try my best to not get casual. I did come with questions. I literally have 4 pages of them.
Impressive.
Which is very impressive. I think it's very impressive because I write the questions, obviously. And so you have written a brand new book, Dr. Darrell Hall. It's right behind you there on your poster, Speaking Across Generations. Man, I gotta ask this question: what led to you writing this? Like, how did you know? You know what? This is for me.
First of all, we are friends. You know, I'm not gonna leave y'all there on the ledge on your own.
And we, I mean, some folks have been known to happen often. In fact, we're like, mine are where? Where's he out here now?
And we've known each other for at least 10 years, probably more. So, you know, it's a delight to spend some time with you today. You're right, man. I just wrote a book, and I'm excited about that book. And as you stated, it's called Speaking Across Generations. And you know, I knew I needed to write this book when I thought through the different experiences in my story that I think compounded to kind of prepare me for what I share here. I think it starts back to when I was a teenager. You know, my mom had me as a teen mom, and she came to me and said that I needed to go to college, but she had no money to send me. So I started participating in oratorical contests to earn money for school. And for years I lost, never won.
This started when? When did you start?
When I was 15 years old.
Wow, okay.
And so I lost every oratorical contest I entered for 2 or 3 years until my senior year in high school when I won them all. And I mean, from local to international, to the tune of like $30,000 in cash for school. And I thought that I was just helping my mom subsidize my college education. And then as a senior in high school, God called me to preach. And I realized God was preparing me to communicate his word. And when I look back on that experience, for me as a young Black man being raised in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, sports was not my ticket out. Being able to communicate well, so to speak, was my ticket out of my socioeconomic scenario, out of my disadvantage, into a space where people could receive me for who I was and allow me to contribute something of value. And so learning how to communicate helped me so much that is now it's a value to me to help others learn how to communicate. Fast forward all these years, since I was 17, I'm 35 now. I've been preaching, serving in multiple levels of ministry, pulpit assistant, youth pastor, now campus pastor of a church with multiple generations present. And when I realized that people were entrusting me as a young millennial to fill this space and role as pastor in their life, I got anxious and nervous, not knowing what I was doing by mistake to connect with them, and fearing that I could lose my ability to connect with the youth who I so easily could reach as a youth pastor. And all that kind of came together, plus 2 years of a pandemic where the Lord just had me home, writing out, thinking through, investigating, experimenting, researching, and adding my own personal experiences. And it was just time to write the book.
Now, in the book, which is, I've read it, and so it's one of those things where you talk about, man, different generations, from elders to boomers to Generation Z to millennials to Generation X, then Z, then millennials, then Z, sorry.
Yeah.
And out of those different type of breakdowns, man, which one did you enjoy about researching the most? And yes, I am putting you on the spot here. So which one? And the styles are all different.
You know what? I'm gonna tell you, I enjoy researching the most about Generation X.
Really?
I enjoy writing the most about the millennial generation, obviously because I'm a millennial.
That's yours, but why? Like, why did you go, man, I gotta like dig into this one?
Yeah, I enjoy reading about X the most and researching X the most because I feel like X is the least discussed
Yeah.
in the broader conversation about generations. I mean, we skip from boomers straight to millennials because of the sheer bigness of these two generations with live births and with currently, the most in the American population. I think I enjoy X because X is where a lot of things turn that I believe really shifted the way people communicate. X is where we enter post-Christianity, where the Bible and truth was relativized, where intellect increased, faith decreased, where proof, evidence, argument became necessary. And I believe that set the stage for how my generation communicates, which is the expectation for dialogue through communication. So I love researching X the most because I think X was probably the most brokenhearted generation.
Yeah, it's actually known as it is the largest latchkey generation.
Yeah, latchkey kids, their parents divorced to a 50 to 55% clip.
Number there.
Churches failed them, families failed them.
Largest abortions happened with Generation X too.
Yep. And it's the smallest generation in American history, wedged between the largest and now the new largest,
yes,
between boomers and millennials. But it's also where communication took a significant step away.
Did it really?
From propositional communication to what I define as dialogical communication. Gen X is a key link between why millennials communicate the way they do, which is completely different from boomers and from elders. So I enjoy researching the most about Gen X because of how much brokenness they experience and how it shaped the way they communicate.
How you know you're a different generation when you're starting to wear glasses. So I'm putting them on later in the day, but I don't tend to wear them to the word of the day, but it's that time of the day. Man, I'm in the book, Darrell. You also discuss, man, generational science, dude. Like you go deep into that. Where did that term come from in your research? And why did you feel like you had to share that with us? Fair question?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that term and my understanding of it is in large part shaped by the work of people like Barna Group, who engage in these polls and amass these current trends and try their best to communicate what's going on in the world and its implication on the church. So that concept, I think, was shaped in me through my experience with their resources. But the reason I thought it was necessary to share it through the book.
Not cut you off, but for Barna, they are one of my questions here. Explain to the audience who they are and what they do.
Yeah, just in short, and I'm sure you could do a better job than I could, but Barna Group is a Christian research firm started by George Barna and now ran by David Kinnaman, who produce resources, write books, and engage in qualitative, quantitative research to help the church understand sociological trends and its implications on best practices for churches, pastors, preachers, Christianity, all the above.
Gotcha. Thank you, man. Didn't mean to
cut
there. Now,
so
Barna research, man, what spoke to you the most because what I love about Barna is they provided a plethora of data. So when you were going through the data, what struck you in the process of that?
I think what struck me is when I sat with their research team to communicate my hunch that I had discovered through my doctoral research, they thought I was onto something that they had not even researched yet. So I got an opportunity to develop a unique experiment that's now proprietary research, meaning I own the findings of this research and you'll only find it in my book. So I got a chance to collaborate with them to create new research, a new experiment and new findings that they had not really thought of, but based on the work they had done before, they could see its viability. And what struck me was that my hypothesis and hunch was not just a shot in the dark. It actually turned out to be something. So here's what we did. We surveyed like 1,000 adults across the United States right before the pandemic. And we took audio clips of preachers and sermon excerpts from manuscripts. And we gave them to these adults across 5 generations and had them select their preference. So once they selected the audio clips they preferred and the excerpts they preferred, we then crossed that against the generational group they were born in. And we discovered that there is a correlation between the generation someone is born in and the way they prefer to hear preaching, which was my hunch, but it was substantiated. And I think what really struck me was, sometimes you can have what you think is a good idea, but then when you run it by some folks like those at Barna, they can tell you yes, no. But when they saw that it had some possibility, and we actually took that bold step of creating this new research and experiment, and the data turned out to show us that generations really do hear differently, and also don't always appreciate that people of other generations need something a little different than they do in preaching. That's when I was just, quite frankly, overwhelmed with with gratitude.
But I got to ask you about, key word there is overwhelmed. I mean, we're in a peak season in life. I mean, I think everybody would say that. Man, what can boomers learn from millennials? And at the same time, what can millennials learn from boomers? And in this communication, because there's so much content that's out there. I feel like more and more every day. How do we strip away all the junk and learning from each other? What advice would you give? I'm putting you on the spot. What advice would you give boomers communicating to millennials? What one piece of advice?
The one piece of advice I would give boomers is, yes, you have credentials, you have authority, you have experience that you have rightfully earned, and that you have dutifully, masterfully stewarded. But the one piece of advice I would give boomers is, as much as you can, don't always leverage your weight and your rank when you engage in a conversation with millennials. Be willing to dialogue as people and not always discuss as socially or professionally different ranked people. Like, even though you've earned your experience, your authority, your rank, your power, your influence, try your best not to wield that. Don't leverage that. Don't hit millennials with the big stick that you carry.
And boomers tend to come in, not to stereotype them, they tend to come in with their rank, financially, education wise, and that's kind of what they were taught, passed down. And so, let's talk about Generation X. What would you tell them when they're talking to Generation Z, man? And
what I would tell X when speaking to Z is that the relational trauma you all experienced that shaped the way you see the world is not the same experience of Gen Z, and give them the space to be relationally whole, where Gen X was, against their own power, relationally broken.
Generation Z, communication-wise, I know this book was written during the pandemic. Was that a part of the process too, and talk about communication styles and how the pandemic may have affected different communication styles and how we communicate with one another?
Yeah, great question. We did not factor in the pandemic as a factor in the experiment or as a component of interpreting the data, because we conducted the experiment before the pandemic actually hit. Now, I wrote the book during the pandemic, and I tried as best I could to think through some practical applications considering the pandemic. What I do think the pandemic exposed, though, is every communicator was having to adjust in some way to continue to connect. And I hope, that the ideas I'm sharing are pandemic proof.
I think they are. I mean, I think we're living in a very unique time with communication, to be honest with you, and who's hearing it and who's not, in truth. And this is why I think this book is so important. Next to last question, man. And you know what? Before we get the next last question, Generational science, can you break that down? I cut you off there a little bit.
Yeah.
What is that in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, it's the appreciation that people born within a certain bracket of time have similarities in the way the world shaped them and in the way they see the world. And it's the ability to study those people during their coming of age years to get an understanding and read of who they are and be able to track with them as they age through life. It's basically acknowledging that everybody born between 46 and 64, baby boomers, have something in common that is unique from people not born during that same window. That there are unique factors that make boomers boomers, and being able to appreciate their otherness from generations and leverage that to better reach them.
Janine Allen, who wrote the book Get Out of Your Head, told me during an interview recently, she goes, writing a book is the loneliest process, which I would have to agree with her to a certain degree. Man, what was the writing process like?
Man, it was, it started out exciting, but I'm gonna be honest, it became pretty grueling for me because I came right out of my doctoral research. Wow. So I had already spent 2 years writing a dissertation, incessant reading. And then I came right into a pandemic and we were all trying to grapple with that. And then I got the opportunity to write the book during that time.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm a speaker who had to learn to write. There are some writers who get an opportunity to speak. I'm a speaker who got an opportunity to write. And so I had to self-educate and attend writing masterclasses and retrofit my understanding of communication to apply to written communication. And so that was an adjustment for me. Then it took me like 10 drafts back and forth with the publisher to, also make it a good read. So it was, I wouldn't take anything from it. I'm thankful for it. But it was grueling. I would say by draft 6, I was like,
you're at 4 to go, which leads into my last question here, man. When you hit send on the book, man, when you were like, hey, we're done, what did you think, man?
Oh, I thought to myself, at least 2 things I'll share. One is, wow, I can't believe I'm an author. This is beyond the scope of what I could have hoped for. Even after entering the ministry, it never really dawned upon me. Others may think it was obvious, but it never really dawned upon me that I would be able to influence or bring something new to the conversation, like I was able to. So I was completely taken aback, like, wow. I think the second thing I thought was, I just hope that all that went into this translates in a way that people can feel it. Wow. Not just understand it. I want people to feel the emotion through the book. Robert Frost said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. I just hope that people can feel hope, inspiration, from reading the words. And quite frankly, to be honest too, Minor, I was just hoping that by the time it was published, it would be relevant. It will be right on time. For me, it's been a 5-year process. So now that it's published, I'm like, oh, okay, well, it seems to be right on time. So that's a divine thing. That's something outside of my control.
It is amazing how the process of it. And I will tell you, I think it is right on time. I will tell you, it will hit you when someone's reading your work or your stuff, and they're in a whole nother part of the world. There are times people will send me an email or whatever, and they'll go, man, this one guy never gets said, I read your article when I was in Iraq. Wow. And you're like, it just hits you sometimes. You're like, man, here you are writing in this computer, in this box, and it's just you in the box. That makes sense. I mean, and it doesn't hit me sometimes where I'll go, man, someone's reading this clear across the
Yeah.
world, man.
Yep. Yep.
And that to me is just only divine, only God can do, man.
And only God could have Mina read a book I wrote. What are the chances?
Well, that's not only a God. That is, well, I'm going to be careful about this. That is not just only a God thing. I would have read the book anyway. First of all,
Oh,
I think the title is great, and I think the information is incredible. So I would have read the book, and I would read the book anyway. Number one, jokester, because it is a great book, man, and I
thank you,
firmly
bro.
recommend this